I think it's time to give you 5 tips that hopefully are able to really speed up the process in Battlegrounds, and that will make you a whole lot better at the game and maybe reach new heights. These are all my credentials. I feel like I need to get this out of the way. These 5 things that I'm going to show you are 5 exercises that I think if you do these regularly while playing Battlegrounds, you're going to develop skills that the top players on the leaderboard consistently use, and what basically is the big difference between them, who are super consistent and always highly ranked, and those who are struggling at lower ranks to understand, you know, the fundamentals of the game. The first one I want to talk about is that people don't use their time properly, and I'm going to show you the best way to do so. So a lot of people that I spectated who are like 6k, 8k, their turn begins and they just instantly make a play. They just see something, have something in mind, they do it, and then later down the line they end up regretting it. And the thing is, the thing that you gotta realize is there's so much time in your turn. If you look at it, you can basically keep on thinking until the rope burns. That's a good rule of thumb. If you're not 100% sure about a play, just think until the rope starts burning. Of course, later in the game when you're playing APM comps with Bran or Hogger or whatever, you don't have that luxury to wait that long. But if you do have that luxury, especially early game and mid game, wait. And one thing you can do while waiting, if you think you have a play figured out, is try and see every single line possible. And with every single line, I really mean try and see as many lines as possible. Like this turn you could level here, you can either buy the full shop, you can decide to roll a couple times. How does your gold work out? What is the strongest possible line that you can do? What is the greediest line that you can do with the most potential? Looking at this opponent, is there all the different units that I should buy? Try and see as many different plays that you can possibly make in the turn, and then eliminate those that you think are bad, and try and rationalize why one play is better than the other. And then when the rope starts burning, you can realize, okay, I look at all of these lines that I can find, this is the best one. And the better you get at this, the more lines that you will see, the quicker you'll figure out which one is the correct one here, and eventually it becomes muscle memory, and you'll be able to take better lines, see better plays than you used to before. So for a couple of games, try this out. Try and do this every single turn that you can, and hopefully this is gonna help you, you know, become more confident in playing the game more consistent, or just seeing things that you might have not been able to see before. Now, on to the second exercise that you can do is, again, a very simple question that you can ask every single turn. You can do this in different games or the same games, but that is a very black and white question, but a question that literally is going to decide how much MMR you're going to gain every single game. And that is very simply, can I greed or can I not greed? A lot of people don't ask this, and they greed in situations where they can't, and they die and get last. Basically, if you ask the question, can I greed? And the answer is yes, greed, because then you're gonna get first places. If you instead do mediocre plays that are not as greedy, you only get a second or third place, so you basically lose MMR. Even though you get second or third place, you could have easily gotten first, you lose ranks. And in situations where you answer, no, I cannot greed, a lot of people still greed and then get last, but if you don't greed, you might get a top 4 still and save MMR. And I'm gonna give you a couple examples of what influences that question, because it's not just as simple as making up your mind. First of all, look at your opponent. I think that's a big deal. If your opponent is gonna deal a big chunk of damage to you, the chances are that you can greed less. The second one is your potential. What does your board look like? What is your health? What units are in the shop? Are they gonna be really good or not? What tier are you on? So all of those things are super important. Just see how much your potential is if you greed, and then figure out, is it even worth it to greed? Like, is all this health that I'm gonna sacrifice even gonna increase my placement? Another thing that can influence that question is the lobby itself. Like, what tribes are in the lobby? Are there any heroes that are already crazy high rolling? Like, is it even worth to try and outperform them, or is it better to stay down, play tempo, be strong, and just take my MMR? So really dig deep into this and figure out if you can take a greedier line, like where on the spectrum you are, like all the way greed, all the way tempo, or somewhere in between. I'm gonna give one more tip, a bonus tip with this. Very often when you're in between, that is wrong. I've realized that when I try and find the middle ground between greed and tempo, I just end up in a weird place that usually doesn't get anywhere. To either go like all the way greed or all the way tempo. Don't half-ass things. Now the next step is another one that I think is gonna help you really realize the stages of the game, and that is defining the early, mid, and late game. You can't just put a turn on it. I've tried this before, saying like, okay, early game is until turn 8 or 7, whatever, late game starts turn 10, but that's not true. Every lobby is super different. Again, a bunch of different reasons why. Like, some lobbies are literally done by turn 12, other lobbies go all the way till turn 20, so every lobby is different, and try every lobby to figure out when you're in the early, mid, and late game, because that is gonna change how you play the game. You play the game very differently in the early, mid, and late game, and let me explain to you why and how you can find this. In the early game, everyone is still setting up. Everyone is just doing stuff, buying cards, trying to go for triples, trying to level, or just figuring stuff out basically. No one has a set game plan yet. Then you're knowing you're in the early game and everyone else is as well, and that's what you should focus on, just figuring stuff out. You enter the mid game in your lobby if people find things to do, which is sometimes earlier than other lobbies. Like if people power level and hit super early triples, that's going to be earlier than when people try to stay down and play tempo comps. The tribes are also of course important, all that stuff, but when people find stuff to do, which is finding your scaling units, which can be on tier 6, 5, again could be on any tier, that is when people start scaling, getting stats, and that is when you need something to do as well. If you're still playing like the early game right now, you're gonna fall behind and you're just gonna get last place. If people are in the mid game, you should be as well. You need something to do. And if you don't have scaling units yet, you just gotta figure something out on the tier that you're at. Of course, I will mention that there's always exceptions to these rules. Like for example, with APM Pirates, if you go infinite, you can basically just play strong stuff, not have anything to do, like, and then 3 turns later go infinite and just be bigger than the entire lobby in a single turn. These are rules of thumb, especially in lower ranks when you're still trying to climb, but this is all going to be very valuable. Just know that like 1% of the time there could be exceptions, and exceptions occur more in the super high ranks. And then the end game, of course, how you find the end game is when people are starting to die and when you need to shift your game plan into trying to win. Basically, let's say it's a top 5 already and you know that in 1 or 2 fights from now it's a top 2. You need to start going into the end game perspective. If you keep scaling or keep doing the same stuff over and over that you did in the mid game, you're gonna lose to people who are better tech than you, who are better prepared to push for that first. So you need to go into that mentality as well. This is a stage where you really need to scout your opponents and see what wins the game. If you're facing big stats, that you need to look for the scam cards on higher tiers, the cards that are able to give you an edge against that. Or if your opponent is like all just tempo max or tempo whatever, you can just keep on scaling, go for stats instead. It really depends again on what they're doing, who your next opponent is, who you think is going to be in the final top 3, and to switch whatever you were doing into something that is going to close out the game. So just being able to properly define on which turn you enter from early to mid game and mid to late game, and also switching your playstyle accordingly, that is already going to make a big difference, because that is something I don't see often in low ranks. People just kind of go with the flow, see what happens, and either fall behind or do things too early. It's just a mess. Anyway, number 4. The next exercise that you can do is a really fun one. I think especially if you're at lower rank still, this is going to be more valuable to you. And that is to do things you have never done before. People like staying in their little comfort zone. They like finding what works for them and just doing that and forcing that over and over. But do things you've never done before, but you've seen on live streams or on this channel or anywhere really, or things that you just see your opponents do, for example. Because by expanding your knowledge, or basically by trying new things, you just have more in your arsenal. And one thing that allows people to climb consistently is being flexible, being able to take every game that they get offered and just make the best of it. And if you only have a couple play styles or a couple cards or heroes that you're good with, or tribes for that matter, you're just gonna have games where you don't get that offered and you lose. If you realize, wait, I have not played Naga in a while, I actually never tried scaling with this specific card on tier 5, I have never done this tempo comp on 4, or I've never picked this card on 4, or this hero, I don't know how to play it. Just pick it, try it out. If it goes poorly, then you can know why it goes poorly, what went wrong, and just not take it again. But maybe you realize, oh wait, there's some cool stuff I can do here. I didn't realize this or that. And also you will understand your opponents better. If your opponents are playing certain tribes that you've never played before, but you tried them and you know how they work, then you also know what to play around. You also know how they're scaling, what they're looking for, and you can see if they're on top of tier 4 or 5, that they might be lacking certain cards or that they're not going to be that strong. So you basically just give yourself so much more information and big advantage, more tools to work with, and better ways to understand your opponents. I'm just gonna give a small example. Like recently in the meta, I've never seen people go 4-on-4, which is an extreme power level, because it's just not meta, it's not good right now. But I was kind of forced to do it and I wanted to give it a go, and it was the most fun game I played, an easy first place, and ever since I've been doing it more and more, and I realized that people are sleeping on it, and it's something that I feel very comfortable with, that I like doing. And I know now as well what the good things are on tier 4 to hit early, and the bad things, because I've also failed, of course. So just go out of your comfort zone, do things you've not done before. This seems like a very simple tip, but try it. Just try it, and if you fail, you know, you learned, right? As long as you learn from your fails, that's all that matters. And now the final thing, And I think one of the more fun things as well after you master this is to always think a turn ahead. You can do this while combat. Like, watching a combat is pretty pointless. Like, even at higher ranks there was a meta or a time where people skipped the combats by disconnecting, which doesn't happen as much anymore because there were also issues with disconnecting. But basically, watching combat is stupid early on and in the mid game because you can't control the outcome anyway. You're basically just praying that you win some coin flips. So take all the time that you have left of your turn if your turn is done, or during combat, to figure out what am I doing next turn, because that saves you time. That's time that you don't have to spend next turn thinking about obvious plays like, do I level or do I stay down, or what units am I looking to buy, should I roll next turn. All of these things can be done beforehand, and eventually if you get good at this, try and think 2 turns ahead or even 3 turns ahead. I mean, if you have a specific leveling curve, let's say you're playing Maiev or a farm, you know you're leveling up and up and up, try and figure out if there's reasons to stay down, what you would stay down for, how you could maybe do a different turn. If you triple, try and figure out what you want to hit already so you take less time deciding that. Basically, just play some games and every turn try and figure out the next turn beforehand. Don't just stick to it, okay? You can have a good idea of what it is, but maybe you get offered this crazy card or a matchup or a ghost that completely throws you off and is going to change your game plan. That can happen, but just have a general idea of what you want to be doing. So play some games and try and use all of these 5 different tips in them, or these exercises, and by the end of it, if you get used to all of these 5, I can guarantee you you're going to be at a new level than you were before. So play some games using all your time until the rope to figure out all of the different lights that you can take. Play some games where every turn you ask yourself if you can play a greedy turn or if you cannot. Play some games, you can also do this afterwards by the way, where you define the early, mid and late game every turn and then also switch your game plan accordingly. If you find yourself in situations with tribes or heroes that you have not played before, just try it, just do it and figure stuff out. And play some games where you just every single turn try and think 1 turn ahead if you have time available. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. Hope this was somewhat valuable to you and that this helped you out. And you know, maybe check out more guides if you want more specific help. Have a good day.